Okay, so here I'm going to re-show how to do some of that rounded corner, drop shadow, some of the more decorative CSS, and I'll explain what went wrong with the image in the previous video that would not round its corner. So let's zoom out and let's go back. So everything I had about the generator was right. So this is CS6 right here, where once again, if we come to our styles up at the top, we can collect some different things here. So we can find stage and look at the properties here. I can also see that I have it located here. Now if I go to my CSS generator, so if I find one, you can just search for them by Google and you will find tons of them. So if we look around, there's a couple here. So css3generator.com, generatecss.com. I think that was the one we used previously, so let's try this one. So here we go. So we can do CSS. And then on the left, there's tons of different things. We can do everything from gradients to text shadows. We can transform things in shapes. We can add box sizing, shadows, and resize. So let's add a drop shadow, and let's also add a rounded corner, and I'll show you how those work. So border radius, once again, we can either just set these values by dragging the slider, or if you know the code, you can just type the code. But for the purpose of this, I'll show you how to use the generator because in the PowerPoint I gave you full of resources. There's a variety of CSS generators. So if I update preview, it will show me this box with 20 pixel rounded corners. And if I get the code, it's going to take me to a new page that's loading very, very, very slowly, if at all. There we go. And then down here, I can collect this code by copying it. And I can add it into my CSS. So if you know the code, all you have to do is type it in. But if you don't remember it, there's tons of different generators to generate things like gradients and the like. So once you've done that, the last piece of code that you need to add is overflow hidden. And the reason it wasn't working before is because the images were flowing out of the corners of the box and hiding the rounded corner. So the rounded corner had been there the whole time. It just wasn't showing up. So if I preview in Firefox, now you can see I have a rounded corner. If I would like to also add a drop shadow, I can come right back to my generator and I can find drop shadow or box shadow and I can kind of play with it. So I can change my shadow color. I can make it a little lighter and I can kind of give it, maybe 8 pixels by 8 pixels. I'll give it a lot of blur so it's nice and soft and I'll open up the spread a little bit and let's update preview. So that's kind of what it looks like. So maybe that's too big. So I can kind of adjust and play with the preview here. Drop down the blur, drop down the spread, update the preview. Still a little big. Let's update the preview again. Kind of adjust this to get it where we want. It's starting to look okay. Let's spread it out a little more. No, I don't want that. Bring the blur up. There we go. That's a little softer. That's kind of what I'm looking for. So once you find what you like, you just click the Get Code. Scroll down, and then here is your box shadow CSS. So I can copy this. I can come back to my code in CS6, and I can just drop it in underneath the code for the rounded corner. Now when I hit refresh, now something to note is these will never show up in the preview here. You have to view them in the browser for them to show up. So you can see that in this case it looks a lot more like an outer glow than a drop shadow because of how light that gray was. So if we find, okay, I don't like that, I don't have to go back and redo the code. All I have to do is come and find the color code here and I can just change it right here in the CSS. So I can hit that octothorpe and it will bring up exactly what I'm looking for so that I can adjust the code. So maybe I actually want to create my shadow more like the color that already is there. So that's fine. I'll hit save. I'll preview here, hit refresh, and it should change. And if it doesn't, come back and check. So we see that the box shadow in the second one didn't get changed, and that's why it's reading that way. So just copy the color twice, hit refresh, and preview. And now we will see that we have a color kind of closer to what we want. It's a little more subtle. So that looks good there. And I accidentally hit Command S trying to save it. Don't make any sense. Now the nice thing is if you find you like the style that you've got here, all you have to do is copy and paste that style section into other items. So if you actually want to make all of your images that way, you can just go to the different rules that apply to some different boxes here and copy and paste this. So if I Command C copy this and I come down here and find out kind of what's happening here, this is called ID contact image. So I bet contact image is my style. I can paste it there, and I can do the same for my welcome image, which should be somewhere around here. Now, if you can't find it immediately, remember you can hit Command F and find it this way. So welcome, if I look for that and I find the next, that doesn't quite look like what I'm looking for. Let's find the next one. Welcome image, there it is. So then I can hit close and I can drop this content right in there. Now, once again, you won't see them until you preview, and then now you can see that my main images have a nice drop shadow applied and a rounded corner. So these are some of the styles you can add. That's not the only type of styling you can add. You can add some really nice gradients as well. So let me show that one really quick. So let's look for a gradient. And this should bring it up. So now you can pick kind of color 1 and color 2, but I don't particularly care for this gradient generator. So let's look that up separately. So gradient generator CSS. I like one that's going to update live so I can actually really look at it. So let's see what kind of different ones we have. So this W3 Schools one might be okay. So let's see. So it's kind of more talking about the code. It's not giving me a generator, so I don't want to go with that. Let's try the ColorZilla one. This is a good one. So this one I'm familiar with because it works a little like the Photoshop one. So this is linked in that PowerPoint of resources. Really easy to work with. So all you have to do is click the colors. You can change the colors, double click and open up a color picker to kind of get exactly what you're looking for. And you can change the orientation from vertical, diagonal the other way, radial gradient, or horizontal. So this is probably one of the best CSS generators for gradients. One of the interesting things here is you can even sort of switch them up, kind of pull your colors this way, pull your color that way, and kind of change that. You can also play with opacity. So you can select the color and say fade to nothing. So fade to a lower opacity as well. So you can change things like that. You can add additional points and adjust your gradients however you need to and drag them off. And now the code it's going to generate is a lot more robust. So you can see that it has some comments in here that's telling me about old browsers. This one's obviously for, I believe, let's see. This one's got Chrome and Safari in it. So there's a lot of code here, but it's pretty easy. All you do is copy. It's going to try and use Flash, so I guess I'll just copy it this way. Copy. Make sure everything's there. And then come back to Dreamweaver, and you can add this as a background. So I could actually go to this div, which is my welcome div, which I believe was somewhere up here. Maybe not. We'll find it. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's going to be faster if I just hit Command F and find next. There we go. Close. And now I can just, once again, paste this in inside the tag, hit refresh. Now, this should work. Let's see if it looks the way we want in Firefox. So there you go. So we added a really nice gradient background. This is starting to look a little gaudy, so don't go crazy with tons of rounded corners and magical floating stuff and rainbows and all of that. But sometimes a gradient can be really nice and subtle, such as somewhere in the background, or maybe just in like your navigation. You want like a gradient that fades from like a dark color to a light color so it blends a little bit with this image. Maybe you want to sort of emulate this sunset as the background somewhere. There's a lot of ways you can play with it, but really there's a lot of really fun, very special styling that you can do using generators. Now, one thing I should mention still in this video, we kind of talked about it previously, is that CC has a lot of this stuff built in. It's asking me some files have been saved, would you like to load them? I'm going to hit yes. Now, in CC, which is where I'm located now, the menu is completely different, but all of this stuff is kind of built in. So you can see that I can actually go to background and sort of play with some stuff here. So you can see I don't have the gradient generator right here, but I do have the box shadow generator located right here in my menu for CSS. That doesn't exist in CS6. So this is actually kind of a nice addition. It sometimes makes things a little easier, especially with the parts like the rounded corners. You can just add them into each corner without having to go to a generator. Now the code kind of works the same. You can see that I do not have the rounded corner preview or the gradient preview located here. You have to launch it in the browser. But it is worth noting that CC sometimes makes this stuff a little easier to work with because you have kind of more stuff here. So you can actually go to gradient here and add gradients and play with that as well. So you can, it looks like you can kind of mess with the gradients here in a really more direct way without having to go to a generator and sort of play around with it. So this is a really, really great addition. So just be aware that that is there for you should you need it. So I can kind of set this to none, I believe. I can kind of hide that rule. But it's a great way to kind of add a little bit of extra styling to your image. So that's kind of all you really need to know about that. The last thing I do want to go over is how to get all your files ready to turn in. So now that we've looked at some fun CSS and we're kind of done with that, I'm going to minimize all of these many windows. And I'm going to exit and I'm going to go look at the folder here. So in your folder, this is what you will need to be turning into me. So this is for the purpose of the class. Your index.html, which is your actual page, your CSS will also have to be located in the folder, and then any images. So make sure that all of your content for your site is together in one place, in one root folder. That we've talked about since the beginning. Finally, the only other things I want you to turn in the templates folder, you do not need to include the InDesign documents. Simply include the wireframe that you made and the mockup. And then I can compare your mockup to what your final result was. And they don't have to match. I understand that things are going to change. So you can see in this mockup I had made, we have some different background colors. The footer's a slightly different size. Our link styles are a little smaller and different here. That's totally fine. I don't mind if some things have changed. I just want to see that you've reached this level of process work. So in your templates folder, just throw those two wireframes and the mockup, and then the rest of this, and that's done. So basically just the root folder. When you're ready to turn it in, what I want you to do is simply change the name of your folder. So when you turn it into me, it doesn't have to be the name that's linked into InDesign, or I mean Dreamweaver, because I can relink that and test the site that way. I don't even need it to be the right name. So put your last name, and then you can put like travel site, or you can put the city. So you can see Feliciano, and I could put Paris. Finally, once you've named that with your last name, so when I download all these folders, I don't have 100 folders named travel site and I have no idea who's who. Simply just compress it. So when you hit compress, you'll have a zip file. Now this zip file is all you need to upload to turn in. I should note, part of the reason I don't want you to give me these InDesign files is it makes them folder really large. So when you pare it down to just the index, the CSS, the templates, and the images, and they're, nice small web images, as I showed you at the beginning how to batch those out, then the folder will be small enough that when you zip it and upload it, you won't have any upload issues. If you have huge PSD files that you made and all of this, it's going to make the folder too large. Now, what I can actually do from here is I can just double-click your page site and it will open for me. So I don't even need to open Dreamweaver to actually look at your page. And that's kind of one of the nice things about this. Now, of course, I can take that and I can drag this down into Dreamweaver and be able to look at all of your code right there. So that's why I need the full folder, because the folder is linked to all of these different elements. When I open this index.html, it's like InDesign, and that when I open it, if these images aren't here, this page will be broken. So if I pull out this contact image and I open this, I have nothing here because the image needs to be in the folder for me to properly view the site. So there's no need to take screenshots or export this in any kind of special way. Simply rename your folder, remove any overly large template-based files that are not integral to the site itself, and then zip it down into a zip folder and upload it to eCompanion in the Dropbox that I have placed for it. So that is the end of that.